Let us start by chanting Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samha Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samha Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. All right. So today we are going to discuss the Metta Sahagata Sutta, right? The Metta Sahagata Sutta. Now, this specific sutta within the Samyutta Nikaya, right, is also a sutta which is referenced within the Vishuddhimagga when it comes to the getting rid of two factors or two roots, or sometimes we would also refer to them as the three roots, although they specifically talk about only two roots, because the two roots being greed and hatred. But as we know, as we've also learned, delusion always arises within greed and hatred. So sometimes we can refer to them as the two roots or the three roots, right? Because the two roots will not arise, the two roots of greed and hatred will not arise without the third factor or the third supporting factor being delusion, being delusion. Being delusion, right? So, may I have a show of hands just to know how many people have been able to read the sutta before? If you use the clap emojis to signal to me, okay. All right. So not a lot. Okay. Okay, that's fine. All right. So if you are on the Piyathan translation, please turn to page 5 on the Piyathan translation. If you're on another translation, then we'll be starting from the beginning, right? Now, this sutta, right? This sutta goes through the practices of when one's practice would be preceded by samatha and then into vipassana, or when it would be vipassana and then samatha, or both the connections or techniques of samatha and vipassana, insight and focus oriented techniques, which in Pali we call yuga nandana, right? Yuga is together or twins, right? Yuga nandana, working together on the factor towards development, right? Now we have discussed reasons through the many days of study that we have been doing. We have discussed reasons, different reasons actually. We've gone quite into depth regarding why it would be necessary to maybe practice vipassana and then samatha, or samatha and then vipassana, or some both sort of start with samatha, go into vipassana, end with samatha. We've actually gone through a lot of these points actually, and which is quite good. So this sutta, I would say, this sutta is not very well known. It is not a sutta that is not very well known, but it carries a lot of weight in terms of how metta as a practice could be used to sort of further oneself within the path of nirvana, right? So to take us closer, or to sort of edge us or support us, push us to the path of nirvana in a more effective way, right? So now, what kind of people do you think would use this sort of? I think that is also important to understand. What kind of what kind of a practitioner would use this sort of a practice. Now, I would say a practitioner, a person who has gone a person who has gone through a lot of trauma could use this practice, right? A person who has a lot of unresolved issues, anger, could use this practice, right? A person whose natural intrinsic tendency is metta could use this practice. Now, we have people who are intrinsically very compassionate, right? Very compassionate by nature, very maternal or paternal by nature. Now, those kinds of people could use this practice. People who have a streak of wanting to help others, right, of wanting to care for people could use this practice, right, could use this practice. Because I think when it comes to people who would want to care, look after other people, it is also when it comes to the spiritual path, we must find a balance. Even when it comes to, we always talk about the bad parts where we try to get rid of the bad and sort of instill ourselves or to go deeper into what is good, but we also should talk about sort of finding balance within the good parts, which will then allow us to sort of perform the good whilst having a balanced practice of meditation, vipassana, the within the mindfulness meditation realms, right? So that is very, very important. That is very, very important. Now, when it comes to living in a forest monastery, I've actually shared so many stories with you, but it is quite a thing when, for example, if there's a big building which is built, if there is some work to be done, the monks always come together, support, and this would be a lot of work, right? A lot of work. Now, I remember when the Power of Meditation Hall was being built, it was all the monks, the lay people were quite lazy. The builders were quite lazy. Not a surprise, isn't it? The builders were kind of lazy. The monks, because of the monks, and because the monks wanted to get it done so fast, all the monks carrying these large bags of cement and sand and all. So all of this supports the practice as we've gone through in terms of the determinations, in terms of the anusatis or the recollections. All of these things support the practice, right? So this kind of practice could be something that people of those sorts perform and do, right? But I think in one way or another, metta is something that all of us do practice. And within this sutta, what it emphasizes on is how we, through the practice of metta, guide ourselves, develop ourselves towards the path of ultimate liberation. And that is what we are going to look into today, right? This is what we are going to look into today. Now, within the Visuddhimagga, I think we should sort of discuss this as well. This is not within the expounding of the sutta. But within the Visuddhimagga, when it comes to developing the metta or developing metta towards nibbana, towards a sort of samadhi, right, towards samadhi, because sometimes it is important to understand that sometimes we do develop metta to feel calm, to feel a sense of relief, to try to let go of anger, to let go of annoyances, frustrations. We develop metta for a whole variety of reasons. Metta is such a powerful practice that we use, or we use it to develop or to get rid of many other mental sort of emotions that we would undergo. But specifically, it is very important to be specific here. This metta, which is talked about or expounded upon within this sutta, basically refers to samadhi. Through samadhi, entering into vipassana, through vipassana, going on to the liberation, as we call it, right? Through liberation, as we call it. Now, generally, now, even when I do metta for you guys, what I would usually do is uh, first radiate onto ourselves and then the general public, or go towards, or start with relatives, friends, family, neighbors, teachers. It can go on. It all depends. It depends on the day. You know, whatever you feel, you could make it up, whatever the way that you feel it, right? But when we are practicing towards the attainment of samadhi, or experience of samadhi, then we have to be a little bit more focused, right? If you remember, or if you can just reminisce, go back to when you would practice metta, and when you're trying to radiate metta towards a specific person, you might sometimes run into a mental block where now you sort of start um, reflecting, or you're reminded of something bad that this person has done to you, or something that has this person, a way that this person has annoyed you, or a fault of this person, basically, right? If there's an attachment which is formed, if it is a lustful attachment or some sort of lustful based attachment, um, then what would happen is, then we would sort of start our vitaka, or initial application, or the mind would advert to the lusty parts, and then on the other side, the hate parts, or the annoyance parts, those parts. So to within the Vishuddhimagga, it sort of relies on the Vishuddhimagga, it relies on a path where the metta practice is done, performed in such a way where you are not distracted, or disturbed, right, by the memories of the negative emotions that you have experienced with that person, or how you would connect mentally in terms of pleasure, lust that you would have towards that specific person, right? So the Metta Sutta, or the practice of the Metta Sutta within the Vishuddhimagga, is prescribed to start first with a person that you really respect, right? This person need not be a person who you know necessarily, but it is important, it is said, one, the person should be alive, right? That is most important. The person should be alive, and two, the person should be a person that you respect, right? If you have a notebook, please write it down, or else what you could do is you could refer back to the Vishuddhimagga and find it, right? The first thing is a person that you absolutely respect. Now, why do you choose a person that you absolutely respect? You choose a person that you absolutely respect because then you will not find faults, right? You will not find faults. Now, even with regards to the kasina meditations, right? Even with regards to the kasina meditation, for example, if we are to talk about earth kasina, or earth element practice, right? The ring of earth that we make, or the circle of earth that we make, there is a distance that we should sit from it, where it is not too close, where it is not too far. If it is too far, your mind becomes restless and wanders into the other objects around the kasana, the color of the floor, or the wall, or sand, or whatnot, right? If it is too near, what happens? You start finding fault. You see sort of specks of paint not properly done. If it is painted, sometimes these kasanas, they are painted. If it is real, if the kasana mandala, we call it, or if it is the earth element made out of earth, then when it is too close, you see sort of holes within this soil, this mud that has been used. So you start focusing on the faults from the beginning, right? From the beginning, which is absolutely wrong. When you focus on the faults from the beginning, what happens? The passion towards a sign does not arise, or the connection of the mind towards or with the object does not arise. That is why when you are first adverting onto a samatha based or a focus oriented object, we try to sort of have it in a way that it is very clear, very pristine, no way to find faults with it, right? No way to find faults with it. That is why now sometimes now a person that I would usually take into take into my focus is sure. Sometimes I've taken Dalai Lama. I've taken Pauk Shadow, actually Pauk Shadow before Pauk Shadow, Venerable now in Aridhamma, but now I cannot do now in Aridhamma Hamduro because he has passed away. Right, so I would usually, actually my go-to is the Dalai Lama. Right, so you have to pick a person that you absolutely respect, better if you do not know the person personally. Right, because now, for example, a problem that monks usually face is now, you know, when you have this sort of when you get to know of a spiritual leader of that, of that caliber, right, of that caliber, and now you're associating, and now when he is a head of a monastery, or for example a head of a monastery or a whole sects, for example, the closer that you get to this person, the nature of the mind is such that the mind will find some fault. If not for its spiritual aspect, it will find faults with the sort of the management processes, maybe management procedures, right? So better that you do not know this person, right? So I remember now personally, of course, don't take any offense that I sort of mentioned it, right? But before I knew Venerable Aryadhamma, before I knew Venerable Aridhamma and actually lived in the monastery, I would be able to focus on Venerable Aridhamma. But now when I got to know Venerable Aridhamma, then I would not be able to focus on him, because Bhante Aridhamma was a very spiritual, absolutely pious monk, all right, but he was really bad at management, right? He was really right, he was really bad at management, and or any monk from the Sri Kalyani Yoga Ashrama Sanstha, of course, if they probably wouldn't have the guts to say that, but that is something that we would always talk about, right? But that was specifically because Venerable Aryadhamma was a figure that, he was so into his own personal practice, he did not want to sort of get entangled within the politics of running a monastery, right? So he very much kept his distance and space from all of that, right? But to us junior monks, having him as our head monk, we expected him to do more in terms of proper governance and management of such an institution of such a caliber, right? So you face problems like this. So then it is very important that you find a figure that you do not know, right? Because we are so dramatic now. This is obviously personal issues, right? So that you do not know, that you cannot sort of think about when you're meditating in your mind, right? So that is the first. The second is you meditate, or you radiate metta first to a respectable figure, second to a friend or family person, right? A person who is I'm sorry, the second is an unknown person, right? A person that you do not know, right? So this could be the man who sells you fish, or the man who, or the guy who helps you out at the supermarket, the passerby, or a person that you see walking at the park every day, right? A person that you do not know, but you have an object of what he or she looks like, what the person looks like, a person that you do not specifically know, right? So you radiate metta towards this person. So again, the person must be alive, plus the person must be a person that you do not know, right? Now, if you see, it went from a respectable person, a person that you absolutely respect and love as a teacher, to a person that you do not know. Now you can see that it's sort of approaching somewhere. And then this third is a person who is a member of your family. It could also be a friend, someone that is a friend or family member. Now, radiating metta towards a friend or a family member is much, much more difficult compared to a person that you respect and do not know, right? Because we have a personal sort of connection, inclination. We know their goods, where they are bad. So by this time, the place that your mind should be at is where you can radiate metta without a sense of judgment, right? Where your mind has excelled a bit. So would you do these practices through a week? No, I would say this would take a good month or so, right? It is a whole, it is, and metta is something that you actually have to feel. Now when you take an object such as anapanasati, now where it is breathing meditation, you don't have to literally sort of feel the object in a way that it's emotionally connected to you. But whereas in metta, you have to sort of feel it in a way where you are touched in your heart almost, right? One thing, is it best to choose a person from the same sex as, okay. So I'll come to that, Samantha. Thank you for the question. Now, okay, I forgot what I was saying. Sorry. Veer, what did I say?
Even I have forgotten.
You must have to feel the subject.
You have to feel from your heart that you're taking.
Saving the day yet again. Thank you. All right. So feel in the subject. The people on YouTube are going to laugh at this. They're not going to understand this. Okay. So you have to feel the subject. Now, with regards to anapanasati, you don't have to feel it in that way, but regards to metta, you have to really feel it in your heart, to really feel it in a way that your emotion. But this emotional connection is not in a way that you're emotionally weak, but in a way that you have your structure, you have your solid foundation strong, you're strong in mind, right? And you're radiating this loving kindness outwards, right? Not in any way pitying or, not sympathetic joy, not any of those. This is loving kindness specifically, right? Loving kindness specifically. And that is something that we all need to understand. I find that many practitioners, when they sort of go into sort of loving kindness, they mix it up with karuna, mudita, right? And sometimes even upekka. This cannot happen, right? Loving kindness is no sort of, it's not sympathetic joy, it's not being compassionate, it's basically radiating, wishing another person well. May this person be well and happy, may this person be free of anger, animosity, whatever you would use to say, right? There is no sympathetic joy or compassion. Oh, this person, that feeling is not there in metta, right? So you have to basically stick on to metta, and that this metta is something that you should feel in your heart. And then at last, right, when you have developed to such an extent, then you radiate loving kindness towards a person who is a person that you do not like, or by this time a person who has been your enemy, or a person who dislikes you or works towards your downfall, right? So basically, by even reminding yourself of this person, you are annoyed, or you would usually be frustrated, or you would have a bit of anger, that kind of a person. But remember, when you are coming into this level, by this time, this anger and this annoyance would have usually subsided, right? Would have usually subsided, because you have gone through this practice of metta now, right? This is the whole objective of this practice, is to have an object where you are not disrupted by the petty experiences that you have had based on hate and greed. Hate and greed, right? That is the objective of sort of dividing the metta into that sort of a practice, right? And I think it is quite effective in that way, right? It is quite effective in that way. Now, with regards to, for example, a usual practice in Burma would be, where lay people would get up in the morning, and in front of their shrines, they would have a globe, right? A globe, those globes that you can turn, right? That usually sits on a, these quite, it's like a globe that you can turn, right? And what people would do is they would have a simple globe of such sort, and they would sort of have the object of each and every country, and they would radiate metta towards each and every country. And they would then go deeper into every region, every person, right? In that way, sort of going deeper. But it is maintained within the tradition of Metta, within the Theravada doctrine, within the Theravada tradition, that as people who are not that developed in mind, where we can advert to many things so fast, where we have distractions of mind, it can be quite difficult to radiate Metta to a whole lot of people, right? That is why now within these 4 types of people that I've stated, we are not talking about groups, we are talking about one specific person, and allowing that method that we radiate to one specific person to sort of pervade throughout our whole body, right? And that is what we are sort of trying to practice or do, right? We can have an idea now, even if we are in our basic metta, if you sort of recollect how you would practice metta. Now, if I am to say, may my parents be well and happy, you probably would take your father or mother first and then the other parent, right? Now, you see the mind would sort of go through, yes, father, mother, or mother, father, whatever it is, right? Now, we don't usually take father, mother both at the same time, right? If you would take my children, you would go through your children almost, right? Right? That is because we are sometimes, our mental power, our mind power is a little bit weak in terms of, and unable to sort of advert this attention towards many people at the same time, right? Many people at the same time. So now coming down to the sutta, right? Now coming down to the sutta. Now, page 5 on the Pyathan translation. Now, I do not know if you notice now, when you read the Pyathan translation, or when you were going through, did you see a difference between the Pyathan translation and maybe the Access to Insight translations that you might read of other suttas? I feel that there is a clear difference, right? And I really prefer Pyathan's translation. I really do prefer Pyathan's translation. Maybe even more than Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, actually. Right? Now, this sutta was taught or preached in, right, in a city named Halidavasana, right? Halidavasana. Now, Halidavasana was a town within the Koliyas, right? Within the Koliya tribe, where the Koliya tribe resided, and the neighbor of the Koliyas were the Sakyans, and they were separated by a river, right? By a river. Now, there are many sutras where the Buddha actually comes, where the Buddha preaches to the Koliyans and the Sakyans. You know, these tribes are very egoistic tribes, right? Very egoistic tribes. Even the Buddha Sakyan clans, they were very, I mean, we could very much sort of understand, I think, because we also have these castes in Sri Lanka, right? Where we would understand how or where these people come from in terms of mind, right? So this was taught in the Kolian country, right? Which I'm sure all of you have gone through, right? And then the monks, you know, they had got ready, putting on their arms and bowls, dressing them in their bowls and the robes. They had gone into Halidavasana for their arms, but it occurred to them that sometimes they were too early for the arms, right? Now, this usually happens. Now, for example, in Yangon, you know, the proper time to go for alms would be 9 o'clock, right? If you go before 9 o'clock, you will not get anything. You will just be walking, right? So 9 o'clock is a proper time to get down to sort of go out for alms. When you would be in places like Mandalay or Sagain, you have to probably leave. So if you're a young monk, you'll probably have to leave by about 4 o'clock in the morning, because you had to take the bus to sort of the outer areas, because the families living within Sagain, Mandalay are not enough to feed the monks, right? There are more monks in Sagain and Mandalay than lay people, right? So the monks would have to take buses, which during that time, the buses are free for the monks. So the monks would take buses and get on with their arms full, dressed and draped in their robes, and they would sort of go into the faraway villages and then come back, right? So usually in those types of monasteries, the monks do not eat together, they eat separately, because most of the time, by the time they get back, which is about 10:30, 11, they are so hungry. So they just, sit down, do the contemplation and they eat, right? Because they've walked so much, right? And usually such a beautiful practice, that I've seen in Burma is now these cafes that you would have now. Burmese men have the habit of having to go to the cafe at least once a day. Right, they have to go to the cafe. Now these cafes are not places that serves alcohol. These cafes are places that they serve tea. They are called tea shops, right? And Burmese men, they have to go to the tea shop, right? And they would get together with their friends, complain about the politics, the government, and they would spend a lot of time. Now even I remember the rector of the chancellor of our university, right? He would come to work, do all of his work very quickly in the morning, and then he would leave for the tea shop at around 4 o'clock. So by 4 o'clock, if you do not go to see him, he's at the tea shop. So once I had an important document which needed urgent signing. So I asked his secretary, where is the tea shop? And I went to the tea shop to get the document signed. And he did not appreciate that, but I had to get it signed. So within Burmese men, it is a sort of thing. And within these tea shops that they all go to, in the morning, they would separate a couple of tables and they would put sort of Burmese traditional noodles or something out. This is something like, for example, something like our kiribat for Sri Lankans. They had the traditional noodles, and they would, where these young novices would be able to sit and have their breakfast in the morning before they go on their arms, which I think is so sweet, right? Because these novices, they are kids at the end of the day, and they are hungry, right? They are hungry, and there are so much of monks and nuns. There's not enough. They don't sometimes get enough food to go around, and so these tea shops sort of arrange tables for these monks to come and sit down any amount, and sort of have their meals in the morning. Before they go on arms, which I think is beautiful and sweet, right, as a culture. So I have come out of the sutta. Let's get back to the sutta now. Right. So basically what happened was, within the sutta, right, the monks, they were waiting for alms, right? They were waiting for alms. So they decided to go to a park, where the other wanderers of other different sects were, right? Meaning, it might have been the Nighantas, it might have been some of the followers of the other sects of the time. They would be sort of wandering in the park because they were wanderers, and most of these sects also, not everyone was well supported, so they would just be anywhere, right? I think even if you go to India in this current time and moment, you find many wanderers, but of course, many of the wanderers that you find here in India, you find a lot of these people who are selling food on the roads. When tourists come, they all have bald heads, so they put on some robes and they go to beg for money. Right? So they go to beg for money. So you find but there are wanderers in India, in Bodh Gaya. You find a lot of wanderers here and there, right? So these bhikkhus go to one of these parks and they entail in a discussion, right? Now this is something which is very interesting, right? Now just imagine, now if we are to sort of if I am to, or I know if other monks are to, at this point of time, in time, we are to sort of sit together with, a priest of another religion, or a swami or a sadhu. We try to avoid the whole conversation of religion, and we talk about something else, maybe the weather. Right? Or, in a way to not sort of tread on anyone's toes, for politeness, isn't it? Right? The only reason that we are avoiding it is to sort of avoid any sort of unnecessary argument or awkwardness, right? So, but you see, now when you read through the sutta, now these monks, they go right ahead and they're talking about, they're asking, oh, what do you practice? We practice this, what do you practice? Now, what does that tell you of the time? To me, how I understand it is the common goal of wanting to find liberation, right? That is what I understand, right? There was a common goal of everyone wanting to find some sort of liberation. And in their understanding, they belong to certain teachers and sects and all of these things, but everyone wanted to sort of find liberation in their own way, right? So there is an openness in the dialogue that one would have with the other sects, right? With the other priests or the hermits, the wanderers, right? Which is, again, I'm sure, which is a very, with the Buddha being, or Buddha rising in the time, there is what we in Sinhala, we call it a Dharma Udyogaya, right? Sort of like a spiritual motivation, of course, a spiritual motivation. I think now during these times also, this is such a time where people are discussing about consciousness. Now I'm sure when most of you all were young, usually the topics that were discussed in monasteries and temples were mostly dana, donations, and generosity, and the precepts, and it was. But now we live in a time where people just go beyond. We don't hear a monk really. Really rarely do we hear a monk now talking about the precepts and all of this. We usually hear the precepts being taught with regard to meditation, mindfulness, development of consciousness, vipassana, right? So we also, I think, we do live in a time where there is a lot of Dhamma, right? Where there is a lot of Dhamma. So that is, I think, very important to understand that there seems to be a common need to find happiness, to find a path towards whatever liberation that they have. Also, the within the when these monks are talking to or conversing with these monks or priests of the other sects, they don't seem to be talking about moksha, right? They do not seem to be talking about moksha. Now the Buddha, right? Now the Buddha, when the monks reported, right? We will come to that. Now what the monks are saying is the Buddha come also, friends also, right? The recluse Gautama teaches the Dhamma to his disciples thus: come bhikkhus, right? Abandon the 5 hindrances, mental impurities that weaken wisdom, and dwell with a heart of loving kindness, suffusing one corner, so to suffusing the second, so to the third, so to the fourth, right? So to the fourth. So basically in all corners, without any boundary whatsoever, radiating loving kindness, right? Thus, above, below, across, everywhere, and to everyone as well as to oneself. One dwells suffusing all the world with loving kindness that is vast, exalted, immeasurable, without hate, without ill will, that is vast, exalted, boundless, without hate, without ill will. Now, and then so we start with metta, or loving kindness, then the same is repeated for compassion, then the same is repeated with regards to gladness, and the same is repeated with regard to equanimity. And then the other sect says, we too also teach Dhamma to our disciples, and the same is repeated. So they say, we also do the same, right? We also do the same, right? Moving on, right? Page 140, right? Then it comes down, right, to the monks reporting this. Now the monks do not know how to reply to this, right? They converse. Now if we are also doing the same, how is it that you and I are different? How is it that our teachings are different when the monks do not have an answer to this, right? The monks do not have an answer to this, right? Then when the monks report this to the Buddha, right? Then when the monks report this to the Buddha, now here there is also traces of the Buddha's humor, right? Traces of the Buddha's humor, right? Where the Buddha says, now when the monks report this whole conversation or to the Buddha, now if we go down page 141 to the Buddha's answer, right? Now this is, now you see, right? This first from bhikkhus, we'll read it. Bhikkhus, when wanderers of other sects speak thus, they should be asked also, how is that the liberation of mind? How is the liberation of mind by loving kindness cultivated? How is the liberation of mind by compassion cultivated? How is the liberation of mind by gladness cultivated? How is the liberation of mind by equanimity cultivated? Right? Being asked thus, those wanderers would not be able to reply, and further they would be annoyed. Right? Now this is now, when we are reading it, it might seem about, the way the Buddha is saying it, but this is, you will find reading many of the other suttas, this is somewhat the Buddha's humor, right? This is somewhat the Buddha's humor. What is the reason for that? Because it would be beyond their ken, meaning they would not have the means to answer such thing. Now, the question that arises in my mind, and something that I am going to research into, right, is when did the word moksha start appearing in the Hindu Brahmin doctrine, right? Because with regards to this sutta, with what the Buddha is saying, there seems to be no such thing, right? Now that would be, I'm just checking if there are any Hindu people listening. Okay. Okay. So there is no, according to the Buddha within this sutta, there is no such mentioning of such a liberation, right, at this specific time, right? So just a question that I'm going to put to you, do your own research as well. If you find something, come back to me, right? So now coming down, liberation of mind by loving kindness, right? By loving kindness. And how bhikkhus is the liberation of mind by loving kindness cultivated? What does it have as its goal, its utmost, its fruit, its end? Right? Now, loving kindness with regards to liberation of mind through loving kindness. Now, the Buddha is, what he is talking of is a specific method that could be used where it starts with loving kindness and ends in liberation, right? This should be understood in that sort of a way. Not to say that all of our practices, it does not say that all of our practices should have such um, such such a beginning, such a starting, but it is to say that this can be done, right? But what is the end result, right? The first, right? Now these are going towards the sambodjangas, right? The awakening factor of mindfulness, the awakening factor of Dhamma investigation, Dhamma vichaya, right? The awakening factor of effort, the awakening factor of zest, the awakening factor of tranquility, passati, the awakening factor of samadhi. Now these are the limbs of enlightenment. Now it is talking about, now then what must we understand? Yes, it seems to be something that supports the limbs, but there should be something more to this, right? There should be something more to this. Now these limbs are being supported or are being cultivated. Specifically, the monk cultivates the awakening factor of mindfulness, right? Now look, supported by seclusion, right? Supported by seclusion. Now what is seclusion? right? Arannagatova, Rukkamulagatova, Sunyagaragatova, right? Going to Arannagatova, going to a forest, Sunyagaragatova, going to a graveyard, Arannagatova, Rukkamula, going to a foot of a tree, or going to a graveyard. Now these are, or these were now when we would usually teach maybe to a more, a non-Buddhist crowd, or a crowd that is not within, or does not understand the Buddhist culture, or has not integrated with the Buddhist culture, we would teach this as physical solitude. That's exactly what it is, right? Though back in the day, when anyone wanted some sort of solitude, right? Some sort of solitude. Now I know many people in Colombo who go for walks at the to the Borella Kanatta, to the Borella graveyard, right? Some people find it very calming, right? Especially living in a city like Colombo, where there's so much of cars and traffic going around, right? So some people do. But during the time of the Buddha, when it came to sort of physical solitude, right? Physical solitude is very important to mental solitude, right? Physical solitude is very important to mental solitude. But with regards to physical solitude, now how can we have physical solitude, right? Now we might be living in homes, it is important that our homes are done up in a way that it sort of enables a person to practice whilst living at home. This is a very important fact, right? Now, not having or not hoarding would be a good tip, right? Not collecting, not having too much to clean up, a place that is easy to clean up, right? Some of these houses, if you are to give it a good cleaning, it takes a couple of days, right? Now, not having those disturbances where you are sort of stressed out with the cleaning process. Now, olden day houses would have a lot of ornaments, right? Small ornaments. Thank goodness the ornament rage has sort of now has become out of fashion now, right? But you go into olden day houses and you have all these ornaments, right? Just to imagine, cleaning and sort of dusting off all those ornaments, it's absolutely time consuming, right? Absolutely time consuming. Now I can see some of you are looking up as well. May the Dhamma bless you. Right. Okay. So a monk actually now seclusion, right? So in that way, seclusion does not mean, please do not understand that seclusion means sort of running away from your families or putting your family aside. And no, solitude can come. You can be in the busiest of areas and yet have mental solitude, right? This is your practice. Now the Buddha, he spoke so highly of solitude, but spent all his time with 5,000 monks plus. Out of his time of being the Buddha and reigning as the Buddha and teaching and all of that, it was a very small amount of time that he actually spent alone, right? Most of the time he would be interacting, right? Now, as I remember now in Burmese culture and tradition, the Buddha was a Friday born. The Buddha was born on a Friday. So what is usually said for Friday borns, that Friday borns are quite talkative. Right? So the Friday borns are quite talkative. So actually the Buddha was a person who actually expounded, surely the Buddha was quite talkative, not to mean it in a disrespectful manner, but the Buddha did expound a lot. But the Buddha also had mental solitude, right? So mental solitude for some, whilst living completely alone, can feel so busy in mind, right? So this wholly comes down to one's practice, right? The second, by the fading away of lust, right? Now, what does the fading away of lust mean? The Pali word which is used is viraga, right? Viraga. Now, viraga would mean is now lust specifically, not specifically. When we use the word lust, it specifically would mean something of a. I mean, we know what lust means, right? But this viraga could also, this lust is refers to both sexual lust and the lusting that you have for objects as well, right? Viraga means sort of disattachment, or not having or fading away, rather actually disattachment from these things that you're attached to, right? So when you read the word lust, please do not understand it in a way that it is sort of refers to sexual lust. It refers to lusting for material objects as well, right? By the cessation of suffering, nirodha, the cessation of suffering, right? And ripens in letting go of defilements. Ripens in the letting go of defilements. Now I love the way that Piatan has translated this part, right? Now look at the translation. By the cessation, and ripens in the letting go of defilements. Now, the way that he has translated gives us the clear idea that the defilements will not just vanish. We have to let go of it, right? We have to let go of it. So it is a working effort in sort of letting go of the defilements, a good working effort, right? And that goes down to the mindfulness. Now I am not going to go down through the Sambodjangas because we are having a whole sutta. We are going to discuss the the limbs of enlightenment on another day, right? I have that planned out for all of you, so I'm not going to go into detail with regards to this now, right? But we are going to cross over the practice of how the metta can be taken into sort of the enlightenment, right? So this is talking about the 7 factors of awakening that allows a person to achieve enlightenment, right? So it goes, so in same way, supported by seclusion, fading away, viraga, nirodha, and the getting rid of the defilements, one attains to sati sambodjanga, and then dhamma, investigation and effort and zest and tranquility and concentration, right? And concentration. Moving down now, the 5 perceptions, page number 143, right? 143, right? The 5 perceptions. Now, if he wishes thus, may I dwell perceiving the repulsive in the unrepulsive, right? He dwells perceiving the repulsive therein, right? Now, this is referring to how do we let go of the 2 roots, greed and hatred, right? Greed and hatred, right? Now, if we just take a moment, I hope that all of you have the sutta in front of you. If you do not, I am quite displeased with you. Right? Please look at the 5 perceptions, right? We'll read through this, right? If he wishes thus, may I dwell perceiving the repulsive in the unrepulsive, right? He dwells perceiving the repulsive therein, right? If he wishes thus, may I dwell perceiving the unrepulsive in the repulsive, he dwells perceiving the unrepulsive therein. If he wishes thus, may I dwell perceiving the repulsive in the unrepulsive, and in the repulsive, he dwells perceiving the repulsive therein. If he wishes thus, may I dwell perceiving the unrepulsive in the repulsive and in the unrepulsive, he dwells perceiving the unrepulsive therein. If he wishes thus, may I dwell rejecting both the unrepulsive and the repulsive, and dwell in equanimity, mindfulness, and fully aware. He dwells therein equanimously, mindful, and fully aware. Or else he enters and dwells in the liberation. Okay, right? Now, what does this mean? Right? What does this mean? Now, first, right? First, we are talking about, right? Now, this is with regards to, right? With regards to what type of object are we trying to deal with, right? What is the object that we are trying to deal with now? Because now this is actually a extraction from the Tikandaki Sutta, right? So this sutta, actually not an extraction, that would be wrong to say. The detailed definition of these 5 perceptions are mentioned within the Tikandaki Sutta, right? Now, if one would want to go deeper into, you can visit that sutta, right? That sutta, the Tikandaki Sutta, right? Now, what we are dealing with here, right, is the object. Now we are trying to let go of tanha, greed. Now we know with greed we attach onto an object. So the object is what? Agreeable, right? Agreeable, something that we like, something that we find pleasure in, right? And then we have, right, the repulsive, contemplating, or if we think thus, contemplating the unrepulsive in the repulsive, right? What does that mean? He's dealing with a disagreeable object, an object that is not so pleasant. So what is that? Dosa, right? So this is in relation to, because in metta, if you take the practice of metta, what are the forces that you're dealing with? Now, like I told you, right, when we go through the 4 different types of persons, we either have some friction with that person, so we are unable to do it. On the other side, we have some attachment to a person, so we are unable to do it, right? Now you see why these perceptions are there, right? Because in metta, the difficulties that we face is with regards to these 2 specific types of objects, which is pleasant objects that you cling on to, and then it is unpleasant objects that you find yourself pushing away, right? You find yourself pushing away, right? So the first one, in the case, now if you would turn to page number 135, right? Page number 135, right? Now there you find the 5 perceptions with a translation from the Patisambhida Magga, right? And of course, the Vishuddhi Magga as well has adopted it as well, right? Adapted from the Vishuddhi Magga as well, right? First one, in the case of an agreeable object, usually a sensually attractive person, right? So a good looking person, right? One either pervades it with a thought of foulness or regards it as impermanent, right? Regards it as impermanent. The second one, in the case of a disagreeable object, a hostile person, one either pervades it with loving kindness or regards it as physical elements, right? Loving kindness or regards it as physical elements. Now let me tell you, right, now with regards to, because this word regards is used, now you must be very sensitive to these words, as you read the sutras, you must pick up on these words, right? When I started off also, I did not really understand the intricacies of these words, but it is very important that you understand these specific words that are used. Now regard, right? Regard, I hope that all of you have the handout in front of you, right? This is very important, right? Or else it will be a time wasting exercise, right? So,
I'm fine.
Bill, what? You can't find
But
it?
I'm looking at, I mean, I've turned on to the sutta, but the pages are marked differently. And I've lost,
So
I was following.
the page number is, you're on Piatan's translation, Bill?
Yes.
Then page number 135.
No.
Page
Yeah,
number is at the bottom of the page.
1, 3.
Right? 135. So if you would go from the top, it's the second page. right?
Okay.
Page number is in the bottom, actually.
Yeah,
So the
bottom right hand side is
bottom is,
page number.
so I have 139, 138. This is 13.
So go up.
You're saying 135.
Yeah. Yeah, dude.
Okay,
Right?
all
It's
right.
the second page. Okay.
Okay, okay. So we are doing the 5 perception that there.
Yes, dear. Yes, we are. Yeah. Now, right? Now, I forgot what I was going to say. What was I saying?
For the repulsive in the repulsive in the unrepulsive.
Yes, yes. Okay, I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, anyway. So in the case of a disagreeable object, okay, regards. Okay, so now when this word regards, right, is used, now we see kindness or regards it as physical elements. Now what is regards it as a physical element? When you use the word regards, are you telling yourself to change the way that you, yes, thank you, Samantha, change the way that you think, right? Now, yes, because what we are doing here now with the two, what the technique that we are using here is actually we are teaching the mind how to think so that we get a kick start into really being able to see what is existent in reality, right? So when you would say, so for example, now you see a beautiful person, absolutely beautiful person, right? And of course you find that you have some sort of lust arising towards this person, right? So what do? You tell yourself about the foulness, right? So but through sight there seems to be nothing foul. There seems to be nothing foul, but you tell yourself why. This is to get your mind thinking in that manner, right? Remember, these are the 5 perceptions. This is how you train through the perception, so the altering of the perceptions, how we train. Now in CBT, right, in cognitive behavioral therapy, right, a lot of these techniques are actually used. Certain words that you would use in hypnotherapy, similar, right? Certain words are used to sort of tell you, sort of impinge you or put an idea into your mind so that you start thinking in that manner, right? So I see that in the same way here you find certain words very important. This speaks about how we practice it. We tell ourselves, you might not believe it, but you're telling yourself, right? You're telling yourself that this object is something, that it is part of the physical elements, that it is something that it is something which is impermanent, that it is foul. These are things that you tell yourself, right? So in the second one, in the case of a disagreeable object, example, a hostile person, one either pervades it with loving kindness or regards it as physical elements, right? Now here, what you do with a hostile person, now there are more sutras that break this practice down, right? Maybe we can come to it one day. But with regards, when it is a person that you do not like, the absolute, in the Buddha's dispensation, where you go away from that person is the absolute last resort, right? When you completely avoid that person and not even face that person, that is the absolute last resort. Because why? What does the Buddha say? When you go into that level, right? Now let us say there is a devotee or a person that I had to completely cut ties with, or I do that, right? But when I do it, what happens? Mentally, you know that you have gone into that level where you have completely cut ties with the person, right? This disturbs your practice of metta, right? So what the Buddha's initial, or what the Buddha would always prescribe is try to repair, try if that person is, even if that person is a toxic person, first of all, do not make enemies, right? Do not make enemies. World is a better place without any enemies, right? The second being, you do not allow that person's toxicity to affect yours, right? If you are able to do that, then there is no reason for you to break ties, the Buddha says, right? But if you absolutely cannot protect yourself from that toxicity, and if you find yourself galloping into a hole of depression or hole of sadness and toxicity yourself, then the Buddha says, try everything to repair the situation. If all of that works, I think, as I remember, there are 6 steps that the Buddha goes through, including the giving of presents, including the practice of metta, including the contemplation of one's practice, right? The last resort is then to sort of break ties, because then you can be, but the Buddha says, go through each and every step, because then you know in your mind that you tried your level best, right? If you don't try your level best but easily just cut people off, right, then that is something that disturbs your practice, because it is a questionable decision onto you as a Buddhist, as a practitioner who's working towards Nibbana. Because Nibbana, to attain such a sublime state of mind consciousness, we have to have this state of bliss, love, compassion, and all of those good qualities, right? The third one pervades both agreeable and disagreeable objects with the thought of foulness, or regards them as impermanent. Thus, one perceives both as repulsive, right? Now this could very much be a person, this could be an animal, this could be any object, where it could both serve as an object which is agreeable and disagreeable, right? Then you use the attitude of foulness. Now remember, because foulness is there, foulness coming together with here impermanence, right? Or foulness could also come together with metta itself, right? Foulness could very much come together with metta itself. How? Right? Because of the attributes of foulness, right? This is something which foul. Let us take a being, right? It is the attribute of foulness, right? Because of this foulness, it is conditioned by impermanence, suffering, and non-self. May this object or this phenomena be well and happy. In that route, you can take mixed foulness and metta, right? And then the fifth one, the fourth one, one pervades both disagreeable and agreeable objects with loving kindness, or regards them as physical elements. Thus, one perceives both as unrepulsive, right? The fifth one, avoiding both disagreeable and agreeable. Now it's avoiding, right? Avoiding both disagreeable and agreeable objects, having seen a form with the eyes, heard a sound with the ears, smell a smell with the nose, taste a taste with the tongue, felt of touch with the body, cognize a mind object by mind. One is neither glad nor sad, but abides in equanimity towards that, mindful and fully aware. Now this is like the elemental meditation. This is like vipassana. This is of course a higher stage, right? Let me tell you, this is a higher stage, but this is when you perceive sound as sound, smell as smell, in that way. This is a form of a higher state of mind, where you are avoiding it altogether as a pleasurable or a disagreeable object. Because you have this fact of development in your mind, you are able to now have an equanimous feel towards both objects which are intrinsically desirable and intrinsically not deniable, not disagreeable. But now we have to connect this with Abhidhamma a bit, right? We might run out of time today, but we are going to continue. Before I forget, tomorrow's class is going to be, we are going to have it a bit early tomorrow, right? Hold on, I'll tell you exactly what time. Before I forget, I want to tell you that. So we start the class at 7 usually, but tomorrow we will have to start the class a little bit earlier, because I am having a I will tell you exactly. Okay, so tomorrow's class will be from 6 o'clock to 7:30, just for tomorrow, right? Just for tomorrow. I will be sending out an email and putting it on Facebook as well. So just for tomorrow, we will be having the class from 6 o'clock to 7:30. I am having an important meeting that I can't miss with Swela Brahman. So because of that, I'm just changing the time. Excuse me for that. It will just be for tomorrow, right? So now, so this is a higher state of mind, and it is more you avoid completely the disagreeable and agreeable object, because you have more power in terms of being able to understand the object in terms of its realistic nature. Now we have to connect this with a bit of Abhidhamma, right? Now we spoke about, now there within Abhidhamma it speaks about rootless consciousnesses, right? Now rootless consciousnesses, I am not going to, rootless consciousnesses can be divided into 3 parts. That is, those rootless consciousnesses which are resultant of wholesome, those rootless consciousnesses that are resultant of unwholesome, and those rootless consciousnesses which are functional, resultant functional, right? Now the one might think now, for example, let us say, as a human, we see some feces, dog feces in a garden or a park that we walk to. It smells really bad, right? Smells really bad, looks very unpleasant, not something that you wanted to see on your at 8 o'clock in the morning when you were going for a nice stroll, right? Not something that you wanted to see, right? Now what is that? That is a rootless, unwholesome resultant, right? Not to say that you saw it because of a past wholesome karma, but your eyes cognize that kind of an element because that element was unwholesome. Now let us say, now my question to you is, now most of you are people who are also in my Abhidhamma class. My question to you is, what if it was a dog who saw the feces? Would it be a wholesome resultant or a rootless, unwholesome resultant? This is my question to you, right? Now, please use the chat section, right? Please use the chat section and tell me what you think, right? Is it a wholesome? So if it is wholesome, you can say wholesome. If it's unwholesome, you think it's unwholesome, you can say unwholesome. Come on, let me see. What do you think? Now this is a dog. Now to a human, it was unwholesome. Now what about to a dog? Okay, rootless, unwholesome. Okay, what do the others think? Yeah.
Can it be functional?
Functional?
No, functional. Because when dogs see this one,
the rootless functional?
Rootless. No, not functional. Action only. Action only. What is that?
It will be wholesome.
Are you talking about the Manodwara Vajana, Panchadwara Vajana, and the Hasitupada Chittas?
No. I withdraw that. Yeah, okay. It can be.
The withdraw Mala will give you a tokka.
She's sitting next to me. She's.
All right. So please tell me, what do you guys think? A dog seeing some feces, right? Shriyani, what do you think?
I think the dog doesn't have the ability to analyze and evaluate.
It doesn't, but the dog has consciousness. The consciousness arises. Now, we are not talking about analysis here. We are talking about what consciousness loves or loves. Now, we spoke with regards to rootless function, rootless conscious, rootless resultant consciousnesses, that it helps the functioning of the eye. It is not anything to do with the analytics and the understanding of the object. It allows the retina to take an object, for the tongue, the taste buds to feel a sensation of food. You know, that is all. There is no analytics here, right? Meiri says rootless, wholesome. Okay. The dog will be without knowledge, rootless, right? No. Okay, so so basically it is either rootless wholesome or rootless unwholesome, right?
Rootless wholesome, I should say.
Rootless
Because
wholesome.
the dog likes feces, or likes to smell it, or maybe, you know.
It's rootless wholesome because the eye consciousness has equanimity towards. If it's a rootless wholesome, right, then the eye consciousness, the feeling is equanimity. It's neither bad or good. So it's a wholesome result for the dog.
Okay, someone else? Who? Manisha, what do you think, Manisha?
I think maybe wholesome.
Wholesome, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Charita, what do you think?
I think it's rootless, unwholesome.
Why, Charita?
I don't know how to explain. I just guess.
So, okay. Okay, thank you, Charita. What about Mahal? Mahal, what do you think? I've unmuted your mic. Mahal, we can hear you. Mahal has gone somewhere, I think. Okay. Okay. So actually, with regards to this question, the wholesome or unwholesome, whether it's wholesome or unwholesome, does not depend on the person who's cognizing. It depends on the intrinsic nature of the object. The intrinsic nature of the object is the determinant factor with regards to whether it's a wholesome or unwholesome, right? So feces intrinsically is something which is unwholesome. So because of that, it would always be an unwholesome resultant, right? An unwholesome resultant, right? And it would be cognized, by a rootless, unwholesome resultant all the time. Now, why is this? Because of the nature of the object that is grasped or that is seen or arrives at the sense doors, right? It is because of that. So it will always be something which is which is cognized by unwholesome. So you've learned something with regards to Abhidhamma now. It depends on the object itself, right? It depends on the object itself. Now, we will not have time to complete this sutta today. We are going to complete the sutta tomorrow, day after, not day after tomorrow, next week, right? Next week, we are going to complete the sutta next week. So with regards to what we have completed up to now, do you have any questions? Up to now, do you have any questions?
Yes, Bhante.
Yes.
Yeah. When you explain this, can you explain it when you change from samatha to vipassana in certain aspects? Because it's almost like Yugananda, right?
This could be Yugananda. It could be. It could also be. It could also be Samatha Pubbangama Vipassana. It could also be Vipassana Pubbangama Samatha, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Can be all three. Yeah. But yes, I understand your confusion, Veera. But I think in this, the way that it has been presented here, it's actually Samatha Pubbangama Vipassana, right?
Right. Okay.
Samatha Vipassana, right? So basically, within the sutta, what we understand now, the sutta, I understand the sutta, the way that this sutta is a bit presented with the details, it is a bit confusing, right? But when we go through now the Buddha, of course, the relation of the bhikkhus with those hermits, and then they come back and they talk to the Buddha, and then they emphasize on metta, mudita, karuna, upekha, and then it goes on to sort of speak about the bodhangas, the 7 awakening factors, and then it goes on to the 5 perceptions. Now the 7 bodhangas are to say, what goal do you have? Which then again asserts my saying to you all the time, have a goal in your meditation, right? Meditating without a goal is a tiring exercise. A tiring exercise. You have to have a goal, and this is why in the sutta it first starts off, or the Buddha starting off to say what the path is. The first, it's the goal. Now, for example, some of you might have wondered. It is said that when one achieves sotapannahood, right? Achieves sotapannahood, this person attains enlightenment within the next 7 births, right? Within the next 7 births. How does this happen? Because of the strong determination. Right? Because of the strong determination. That is why it happened. Not any other reason. It is not a miraculous reason. Because of the very strong determination. Every day when you get up, if you tell yourself, let me do something towards the attainment of Nibbana, that aspiration, that determination will work in your favor in your practice, right? You have to be able to determine, and these determinations, even affirmations, determinations, have a very, very, very strong power, right? Even with regards to your worldly life, right? Even if you're going through financial difficulties, go into a bit of meditation, right? Because financial difficulties, the Buddha says, he speaks about, one must be financially stable to be able to have a clear mind. We all have bills to pay, right? We all have bills to pay. None of us is living free of charge. There are bills, responsibilities, and all of these things to pay, right? So the Buddha does not sort of put that completely off. What he says is, you must have financial stability. Now, there is a sutta where you can even, where the wishing of wealth can be a wholesome plus lokottara goal. How? For example, may I be able to amass wealth where I could be able to support meditators, practitioners, and through that merit be able to attain Nibbana. Now that is an aspiration of a person which is accepted as a wholesome aspiration, right? It all depends on the final goal. Why do you want wealth? Why do you want to be married? Why do you want, all of these things? It all depends on that final aspiration that you would tell yourself, right? And the Bodhisattva, in many birds, actually, many bird stories, the Bodhisattva has used this technique to sort of fulfill his paramis as well. Your mind is very powerful, right? Your mind is very powerful. You tell the mind and you tell the universe what you want, right? But make sure that you are not a puppet in the universe, that you are trying to come up, to sort of stand up on your own energy, right? But don't sort of be sort of a weak in a way that you are sort of trying to fool yourself. No, you cannot fool the universe, because the mind is always connected to the universe and you get what you deserve, right? So in that way, kusala, affirmations, determinations help us in a very, very distinct way. And that is why the Buddha is here again telling, this is what you focus on. The enlightenment factors, the factors that help you achieve enlightenment, right? And the rest of the sutta we are going to discuss next time, right? So make sure those of you who did not read, make sure that you read the sutta and come, right? Read the sutta and come, and that's quite important, right? Tomorrow we will be doing the Abhidhamma. Make sure you read that as well, right? A lot of reading for all of you, but make sure that you read that as well. Even if you have to read a couple of times, go for it. What we will be doing tomorrow, as I remember, is we have to finish. You have to finish the beautiful functional consciousnesses, as I remember. Yeah, beautiful functional consciousness, I think. And if we have time, we will also go into the jhana, the absorptions, which is going to be quite interesting, right? So good night, everyone. Have a pleasant rest of the day. I wish you all the very best and a pleasant time of practice and contemplation. Good night and take care. Theron Sanna.